1 second. Okay, thank you, Elizabeth.
All right. Hello and welcome to our book discussion and panel this evening. My name is Elizabeth Lane and I am Bloomfield Public Library's director. We are proud to introduce the first in a new series of programs addressing topics and issues of immediate relevance and importance in our community. We as a library are focused on identifying barriers to access, and we are very aware of the structural issues that plague our society and therefore our library surrounding race. We hope that tonight's program, coupled with all of the resources the library has to offer, allows us all to learn more from and about each other and to move forward in being more intentional about addressing these issues. The library is a safe place for dialogue and we will proceed with respect. We hope people will listen to understand. Rachel's going to talk a little bit about our chat feature.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Tanucci, one of the adult services librarians, and we're very happy that you're joining us this evening. We're very lucky to have our panel as well, and we love active engagement, but we do want to make sure that we give the panel the platform that is, enough time for them to be able to present all the material to you. So what we will do at the end, we will give you a signal that if we have time, you can ask any questions that you might have and you can put them in the chat. If you're not sure how to do that, we can help you, or we can take your question verbally at the end. So just hold till then and then we will let you know. Thanks.
Thank you, Rachel. I'd now like to introduce our panelists, starting with Reid. Wayne, can you give a little wave? Wayne attended the University of Scranton and received a Bachelor of Science degree in accounting. After considering multiple career paths ranging from professional wrestler to the military, he is currently pursuing a career in finance as an assistant controller for a global PR agency headquartered in New York City. Chief, can you give a little wave, Chief? Chief Paul Hammick has served in law enforcement for 30 years and has been the Chief of Police and Emergency Management Coordinator for the town of Bloomfield since 2011. Prior to his tenure in Bloomfield, Chief Hammick served for 21 years with the City of Hartford Police Department, attaining the rank of Deputy Chief of Police. He has coordinated the investigations of several high-profile major crimes, served as the lead investigator for officer-involved shootings, and taught colleagues as a certified instructor in hate and bias crimes. Chief Hammick is a member of the International Association of Chiefs of Police, the FBI National Academy Associates, the Police Executive Research Forum, and Rotary International. He has served on the board of directors of the Greater Hartford Police Federal Credit Union, the Hartford Police Benevolent Association, and is currently the chairman of the North Central Connecticut Municipal Regional Services Association. The chief holds a bachelor's degree in history from Trinity College in Hartford and is a graduate of the FBI National Academy and the Senior Management Institute for Police. Mayor Suzette DeBeatham-Brown is the current mayor of the town of Bloomfield, is a wife, mother, minister, and public servant. She is committed to leaving the world a better place. The mayor has had the opportunity to serve as an ordained minister for the Church of God, a youth advocate for the Urban League of Greater Hartford, a chaplain for the Bloomfield Police Department, chair of the Bloomfield Citizen Awareness Task Force, and board member of Ascend Mentoring, among other boards and committees. She is currently employed with the West Hartford Bloomfield Health District, where she is a vital resource for the district and the community. Mayor DeBeatham-Brown earned her MHS in counseling and a BA in sociology and criminal justice. Co-author and Connecticut Superior Court Judge Charles Gill is a tireless advocate for the rights of children. He has been honored by 2 U.S. presidents, has spoken before and received an award from the UN General Assembly, has testified in Congress, and was a consultant to the U.S. Department of Justice. Sadly, Judge Gill will not be able to participate on the panel this evening due to medical reasons. Before we start our discussion, I was hoping we could have a moment of silence for Franklyn Reid and all the lives that have been lost due to police brutality and racial injustice. Thank you all. And now let's get started. Wayne, let's start with you. Wayne wants to begin the program with a PSA on COVID-19. Wayne?
Well, thank you, Elizabeth, for the introduction and for moderating this evening's conversation. And thank you, Sarah and the Bloomfield Library for hosting this evening's event. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for sharing this evening with us. A few weeks ago, I was guest speaker at an event, and I shared the stage with New Milford Mayor Pete Bass, Tanya Hughes, who's the Director of Connecticut Commissions on Human Rights, and Chief of Police from New Milford, Newtown, Danbury, and Ridgefield. So it's an honor to be sharing the panel tonight with Mayor DeBeatham-Brown and Chief Hammick. So thank you very much. We gather at the time when our world is fighting invisible enemies. 2020 has been an extraordinary year thus far. COVID-19 has transformed our way of life. It's an invisible enemy that is colorblind, genderless, and doesn't care about your status in society. All lives are precious, and we must continue to slow or stop the spread of this virus. Each of us have a responsibility to protect one another. I ask that you think about those around you in public and make good decisions, whether that's wearing a mask, social distancing, and always washing your hands. And together, we will beat this virus quickly and get back to normal life. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. I agree with all of that. And Wayne, you wanted to get started. Do you want to give a brief reflection on 2020 and the issues that have come up for all members of our society?
Absolutely. So our nation is also facing another crisis, which has festered for a long period of time, but it was ignited by the death of George Floyd, an incident which garnered universal condemnation and galvanized millions to protest peacefully. But now, unrest reigns in numerous cities across America. Many has condoned the lawlessness, while others are fighting to preserve our liberty and heritage of history. We've seen politicians against politicians, protests and counter-protests with violent interactions and a dramatic spike in violent crimes. But do you know who's caught up in the middle? Innocent lives, Muslim minorities, cut short. Business owners, Muslim minorities, who saw their establishments looted and burned to the ground. Communities, Muslim minorities, destroyed. Some will take decades to rebuild, while others may never recover. But you know who else is caught up in the middle? Law enforcement. The 99% of police officers who serves their community and does a wonderful job each and every day. We're seeing tone-deaf politicians willing to allow cities to become the wild, wild west while resisting intervention, handcuffing the ability of law enforcement to do their job, and blaming the unrest on the pandemic. So I ask, we must not allow rage and violence from a select few to overshadow compassion. So that is what I've seen so far in 2020. We started with COVID. That was going to be the most important thing of the year. And then the death of George Floyd, that changed everything and essentially just ripped the Band-Aid off society. And these issues have been festering for a long period of time. But was that 8 minutes and 46 seconds the issue that tore the, as I said, the quote unquote Band-Aid off society? I think when the protest subsides and the movement diminishes, the 8 minutes and 46 seconds will live in the hearts of the victims' families, the officers, their families. And every year for the rest of their lives, they will remember that moment, where they were, what they were doing, and when and how they reacted. It's only 8 months into 2020, and it's been a very challenging year so far.
2020 has indeed been incredible on many levels. But let's go back in time, Wayne, to the topic of your book, the death of your brother.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you and Judge Gill decide to write this book?
Well, we spoke about the 8 minutes and 46 seconds that it took for George Floyd, but my family also remembers the 41 seconds that Officer Scott Smith and Franklyn Reid met on a main road in New Milford before my brother ended up dead with a bullet in his back in view of many passerby on December 29, 1998. With that scenario, many people would expect a Black man who lost a brother to a police officer would write a book filled with anger, rage, and bias towards the officer and to also demonize law enforcement. But that's not what our book is about. Our book is about courage, love, compassion, civility, forgiveness, education, and the understanding of the emotional journey experienced from all sides. So in 2013, after an unfortunate incident, Judge Gill and I came together. I went to his house and we shared our feelings about the case for a few hours. It was more like a therapy session. And at the end of our conversation, I told Judge Gill, I am planning to write a book. And his words were, I can help you with that. And that's how our journey continued and culminated with the launch of our book in January of this year. So we wanted to share our unique story to, one, empower others to share their personal stories, because most of the time when you see these incidents, they are here in the headline for a couple of days, and then they just vanish into history. And then we wait for the next incident to occur. So we wanted to inspire others to share their personal stories. We also wanted to assist other families who have been through this situation or who will endure a similar journey through the justice system. But the most important thing is our unity message. We wanted to aid in rebuilding police-community relations, which I believe is something we need to do now, as soon as possible, right away.
Thank you, Wayne. Chief, Wayne mentions the people in the middle of this topic. As a police officer, can you remark on that?
When you say the people in the middle, do you mean people in the community?
Yeah, well, he said the 99% of the people in the middle, including the police officers.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think, you know, the number of police officers who are out there doing nefarious things or doing things that are unlawful and immoral is very, very small. It's a very, very minute part of the profession. And people in our community, there's only less than 1% that are out there committing crimes. So the real, I always talk about the real secret, I think, is just what Wayne said. I use different language. It's creating partnerships with members of the community to try and solve problems in their neighborhoods, to try and increase their quality of life, and identify the things that are decreasing their quality of life, the things that are impacting their community in a negative way. And sometimes those are people. And sometimes, oftentimes, those people have problems rather than, you know, they're hardcore criminals. There's such a very, very small portion of people who commit crimes that are real hardcore criminals. They're normally people who are just down on their luck. They've had a series of circumstances that have happened that have led them to commit a criminal act. And those people, while they need to be held accountable, we also need to have some better mechanisms for resurrecting their lives and ensuring that they don't continue that path and that cycle of, you know, repeated crimes and getting out and then repeated crimes. So I think, you know, working on those things at the end and making sure that we're improving the quality of life for that 99% of people in the middle is what I got into this profession for.
Thank you, Chief. Mayor, as the voted representative of the town of Bloomfield, for the people, what are you hearing about these issues?
Thank you, first of all, for this forum. And Wayne, thank you very much for the book. 2020 just needs to go away, right? But we cannot turn a blind eye to the issues that have been raised. And here in Bloomfield, it's important to have those courageous, difficult conversations. And those conversations have started. We did have 2 racial incidents here in Bloomfield, 2 isolated incidents, but incidents nonetheless. And I think the cry now from most of the residents is having that conversation. We do respect our police department. I respect the chief and we support them. And we're not talking about them per se. We're talking about that minute percent that has impacted the lives of Black and Brown people. And how do we build back that trust, that community with our police? How do we go back to the idea of them serving and protecting? Because that's what they do. That's what the majority of them do. So I think the George Floyd incident, murder that was caught on camera for the whole world to see, has made it pretty clear that the conversation needs to continue. And we, as a community, need to make sure that it's not just a hashtag, it's not just another incident, but it's a true movement, so that this will never be another reality for another Black and Brown young man or young woman. So it's being able to hopefully stand flat-footed with all our convictions and come together as a community for those conversations in hopes of understanding and moving on better and stronger for it.
Thank you, Mayor. Wayne, it's clear after reading the book that you have done your due diligence in presenting all the facts of this incident as objectively as possible. Can you share with us the process of obtaining so many personal reflections and points of view, and any obstacles you encountered along the way?
Well, it's tough as, losing a brother and to revisit those memories. The trial lasted about 5 years in Connecticut, from 1999 to and wrapped up in 2004. So at the end of it, it was emotionally draining on both families, I believe. My family, as I'm sure on the Smith families as well. So once the trial was over, we just wanted to just get everything behind us and just lock everything away. So by coincidence, I kept in contact with Judge Gill over the years, and we came together in 2013. And then I started to review some of the documents, some of the transcripts, and it paints a complete different picture. Because when you're going through the trial, you only see bits and pieces from the newspaper, in the news, but then when you look at the complete transcript, it's like gives you a complete picture of what had occurred. So the first few months of writing the book was very emotional. I think I shed a lot of tears, and I grew a lot of gray hairs, I think, within the first 6 or 8 months. And that's what I felt was I wanted to invest as much emotion throughout the process, because I believe by sharing how you felt or how I felt, I think that's how it's going to become much more relatable for a lot of other individuals that went through this situation. So I learned how the situation occurred from the viewpoint of the eyewitnesses, looking at their statements, from the viewpoint of the evidence, reading all the documentations as well, and also seeing the complete trial transcript as well. So I think those are some of the things that gave me a much better understanding of how the incident occurred, and that's how I felt throughout the process.
Thank you, Wayne. I know the judge is not here, so can you tell us a little bit more about him? As a reader, it was interesting to read that he volunteered to take on this case. And this was the first case in the state of Connecticut to go into the court of law. I didn't realize how that worked.
Well, so after the incident, the state of Connecticut, with the laws of the state of Connecticut, it was the state attorney would investigate the incident. So Attorney John Conley, who was from another district, was appointed to be the prosecutor. So he visited the scene, I believe, the day after the incident, and then he visited Dr. Wayne Carver for pre-autopsy results. So within the first few weeks, they did the investigation. State police did the investigation, and he came to a decision without the involvement of my family or without the involvement of anyone. It was based on what he read through the eyewitness statements, through Officer Smith's affidavit, and so forth. And he charged Officer Smith with murder in the line of duty, which is the first time that has occurred in the history of Connecticut. So as a result of that, there was, widespread media coverage within that, within that 5-year period. So after he was charged, we went to a pre-trial, and I believe it was another judge, and she didn't want to go through and become the actual judge. So Judge Gill stepped up and says, you know what, I want to be the judge on this case. He volunteered to be the judge on the trial. And that's how we got involved in the case.
Amazing. He must have known how much heat would come with taking on this case, both personally and professionally. I might have to write him an email to inquire more about that. Wayne, we know that you spent a lot of time writing this book about your family specifically, and we know that you wanted to do a small reading from the book on your mother's darkest hour, which was one of the saddest parts of the book. Would you like to go forward and do that?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
So let me just set up the first couple, the drama. The way the book is situated, it is written with acts and scenes because we believe it is a drama. So in the first chapter, after the shooting, pandemonium gripped the department. New Milford Police Department had secured the scene, was in a holding pattern awaiting state police to assume jurisdiction. Officer Smith was removed from the scene, taken back to the police department, and then eventually requested to seek legal advice. So emergency personnel, while all that was occurring, emergency personnel feverishly tried to save my brother's life, but on that day, death became the victor. As unexpected as tragedy, it was an unexpected tragedy, and it is difficult to comprehend when it is shocking, when it results in the loss of a life. And so many of us have experienced similar situation, losing a loved one, a friend, in a tragic accident, and so forth. So when my parents found out about the incident, they arrived at the hospital and was confronted with a dreadful reality. So let me take you into that moment when my mother found out, and my parents and my dad arrived at the hospital. And this is on page 69 in the scene titled A Mother's Darkest Hour. Mrs. Reid arrives at the hospital. Gathering her strength, the shaky mother enters the emergency room. The sliding door opens, offering a silent invitation. A ghastly sense of uncertainty cripples her feeling of optimism as facial expression tells a dreadful reality. Beyond the large door labels, authorized only, the body of her son awaits his mother's presence. Mr. Shaw has the grim job of revealing the horrific news. Shaking his head like a child saying no, coupled with the words, "Mark didn't make it," sets off an enormous outpouring of emotion in Franklyn's mother. It's a slow motion collapse as her body gives way and falls to the ground. The wailing is deafening, contagious, and heartbreaking for strangers witnessing her agony. A mother rolling on the hospital floor, moaning in distress while trying to process dreadful news means a heart shattering into 1,000 pieces. She has lost her firstborn child. Caring individuals move to comfort Mrs. Reid. The body resting behind the double door has to wait a little bit longer for his mother. She needs to compose herself and be courageous, and that may take some time. Fortunately, Franklyn's father arrives. Thoughts of the unimaginably clouded with Pam's words, "He's not breathing," are confirmed on seeing his sobbing wife and father-in-law. He finally understands the dread and depression he had been feeling as he absorbs the terrible reality of losing his son. He approaches his wife as she is assisted to a chair. Their eyes meet as despair casts a dark, chilling shadow. This is the worst day of their lives. Words cannot interrupt crying. Only arms wrapped around each other can bring relief. A three-way hug engulfs the couple and grandfather. Life's patterns suggest parents should never outlive their children. But on this day, the pattern is reversed. The doctors approach Franklyn's mother and father, offering condolences with humbling words. We did everything we could to save your son's life. It must be heart-wrenching for them to utter those words, knowing they are the terms of surrender in life's battle with death. Franklyn's parents are grateful that attempts were made to save their son. That is all anyone can ask from medical personnel. The doctors add, if Franklyn's life was spared, he would be in a vegetative state based on the type of injury. Curious to know why, the parents' memories are seared with the answer, he was shot in the back. So that scenario is what my parents was confronted with an hour after the shooting. Again, whatever the situation was, I mean, it is difficult, it's hard, and it's very emotional. And that was what, they were confronted with. Again, with many parents or who experience tragedy, they were confronted with the same similar situation when they go into a hospital. So that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to talk about what the parents or what we felt personally, because others could find comfort in our words if they experience similar tragedy.
Thank you, Wayne. That scene, you could see that scene unfolding. And I know that when we had the Black Lives Matter get together across the street at Town Hall, and when the mayor spoke, words of being a mother was what she brought up. And when she thinks of Black Lives Matter, that's the first thing she thinks of, is being a mother. Mayor, did you want to talk about that further?
So, Wayne, your book was very engaging, right? So let me step back 2 steps. I was born in Jamaica, and my parents brought my brother and I here for the same reason your parents brought you all here. And I can only imagine your mom said, if I would have only known, we would have stayed where we were, right? It doesn't matter that I didn't birth your brother, or I didn't birth George Floyd or Ahmaud Arbery or Breonna Taylor. I didn't birth them, but as a mother, it does something to you when you hear of senseless murders of Black and brown people. I take it as an awesome privilege to be able to serve the town of Bloomfield, but I believe that my first and my most important job is that of mother. And every mother wants to protect their child from every and anything possible. There is not a superhero that can leap bounds like a mother whose child is in danger. And to even hear the words, I can imagine your mom just crumbling because her life stopped in that moment. These conversations are so hard because you carry your child under your heart for 9 months, and to have that ripped away from you is so devastating. And I think that's why it's important for us to confront and to have the conversations and to help to bring some humanity. It's not something that we're fighting for to say Black Lives Matter. It's not that all lives doesn't matter, but we're the ones that are in danger. And we're the ones asking for help, for you to see us, see each and every young Black and brown person as people. And the interactions, I think, will be a little bit different. I think, Chief will probably smile. On most days, I'm really composed. But I think when you put the mixture of your children in that, or someone that you don't know but who have experienced injustice, everything changes. Everything changes. And that's what we are on. We are on the precipice of changing. We've got to start to see how we define ourselves as a country, as a community, as a town. And we've got to have these hard conversations. I, for one, believe that if we can only see past ourselves, we would be better people. This book was very, as I said, it just brought me back, right? For all the reasons why immigrants come to this country. And it brings me to a place of, what do we do? So I honor you for writing that book to bring to our consciousness that we need to do more. We need to do more than marching. We need to do more than posting. We've got to get in the fight and do the honest work of making community for everyone, period.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, you have a very action-oriented approach with your philosophy as chief, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of the training procedures that your department goes through to ensure that these types of things don't happen.
Yeah, first I'd just like to address what we just talked about quick and say that I agree that that was a very compelling part of the book, Wayne. You know, I had the responsibility of overseeing the detective division in Hartford for about 6 years, and supervised over 200 homicide investigations. And I've seen scenes similar to that play out many times. And there's no easy way to approach those things. My philosophy has always been that you work and advocate for the victim's family, and trying to bring resolution to them, and informing them along the way, whether it's an act of violence between the two people in the community or one in which a police officer is involved. Certainly you need to take, you know, extra precautions and extra steps in that case, because you are even more under the looking glass. When I did shooting investigations for the city of Hartford of officers who were involved in deadly force encounters, it was done much different than it is now. It was done much more in a closed and non-transparent environment. Back in 1998, 2000, that's when I was doing them. Now they're done much more transparently. They're done outside of an individual department, the state police or another department, another prosecuting agency will take over, so that you limit those relationships that might affect cases like that, so that you get a much more objective investigation and objective viewpoint of those. What are we doing? You know, we're learning the new laws. We are picking good police officers who are empathetic, who are interested in helping the community, in building relationships with the community, in improving the quality of life for community residents and business owners. And we're giving them advanced training in how to de-escalate situations, how to talk through things when possible and not result to physical force. Unfortunately, I've said this to the town council and to members of the community, there will always be situations where an officer has no other choice but to use force. We try to limit those as much as we can in only those situations where it's absolutely necessary. And then the amount of force is that's reasonable to what we call overcome the resistance that's being offered to stop someone from harming someone else or harming the police officer or take them into custody for a crime they committed. And we review all of those cases thoroughly to make sure that the officer used only the amount of force that was absolutely necessary, that it was reasonable, that it was within the law. And then I report on those on a monthly basis to the town council's public safety committee. But the real aim is to get out in front of those things, right? Is to hire good people, to train them, to have an early warning system. If you have somebody who's showing a propensity that they don't fit the type of policing we want to see here in Bloomfield, which is community engagement, problem solving, And the mayor knows have not been reluctant to remove officers from our department for that. I've seen enough officers over my career who didn't belong in this profession because they weren't in it for the right reasons. And it's a responsibility of management in policing to work with town government and the community to identify those individuals and to remove them voluntarily or involuntarily. You know, my father was a police officer for almost 50 years, and the mayor's heard me say it 100 times. You know, he instilled in me that you get into this profession to do the right thing, to help people. Sounds very cliche, but I've always carried those words with me. And I've tried, since I've been in a position of responsibility within a police agency, to ensure that the people who work for me believe in that same value. And if they don't, then we find them a different line of work, or we get them to at least adhere to that value. Because they are empowered with enormous responsibility and enormous power in the community to take someone's liberty, to use force, and in some cases to take someone's life. And you need to make sure that they are in the proper position, that they act with legitimacy in the eyes of the community, that they're viewed as doing things from a perspective of the best interests of the community, the best interests of the laws of the state and the nation, and that they're not being subjective in anything that they do. And when we find those cases that they are, we need to take action to make sure that they're corrected and the individual is disciplined or removed.
Chief, the way you report the use of force to the council, is that done in all towns and cities in Connecticut?
Unfortunately, no, I don't think it is. I've been in Bloomfield as the police chief for 10 years. For the past 8 years, we have worked towards and then attained a very high level of professionalism. We became what they call nationally accredited through the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. Only 2% of police departments across the nation reach that threshold. We were able to reach that in 2017, but there are many, many police departments throughout Connecticut and throughout our nation that don't have that level of professionalism. And as a profession and as a society in a broader context, we need to ensure that they are brought up to a much higher standard, that their hiring practices, their retention practices, their training, their policies, the things they're teaching to officers, and how they're monitoring the officers' conduct and performance is done at a much higher level than what it is. And we're moving there, but we're not moving there quick enough. We need to enhance that and pick up the pace of that to ensure that policing is held to the same standard as many other professions that we have in society.
Thanks, Chief. Mayor, as part of the library's mission to break down barriers to access, we as a staff are trying to better educate ourselves about the social justice issues that plague our public. Recently, we had a staff discussion about the documentary 13th by Ava DuVernay. Titled after the 13th Amendment, the film explores the intersection of race, justice, and mass incarceration in the United States. We observed just how much the media plays a role in criminalizing young Black men. After Franklyn's death, we learned that the media reports on Franklyn's criminal record. As a result, there was no public outrage in the form of riots in town, even after the police department received some negative publicity in the news. To what extent do you believe the media helps or hinders the ability to manage public relations or redirect the narrative? Discuss the issue with the binary of public media crucifixion and sainthood of victims of police shootings.
So I think the media is a double-edged sword. You want the media to be there to provide you the information. I think that salaciousness, if that's such a word, hopefully my English teacher's not listening, of stories sometimes outweighs the facts. It's very interesting, even with even with George Floyd, you know, it started off like, oh my God, the police officer, it was, you know, they were so horrible and so callous and so cold. And then you heard, well, it was really his fault because he was trying to pass off a fake $20 bill. So then they started to vilify the victim. I think we as a society, sometimes we want to buy into all of that drama. We see the headlines and we just want the dirt behind the headlines. And I believe that that's what the media has also bought into, vilifying the victim. And then when we start marching and rioting, vilifying those who are marching and rioting. There's never a period of where we're giving the facts, all the facts, and nothing but the facts. It sells. I think there used to be a saying, if it bleeds, it leads. Or the fact that some news reporters are ambulance chasers because they just want to get the juice. And they're not thinking about the people behind the story. They're not thinking about your mother or George Floyd's mother or family, or how this affects them, or how digging into their past and their background and pulling up all that dirt like they're deep sea divers isn't just going to rub salt into the wound that's already raw because you've lost a loved one so tragically. I think the media also has to be held accountable, just like how we're asking everyone else to be held accountable. They have to be held accountable on the way they treat our Black and brown men, especially our young boys, because it's always three sides to a story: your side, my side, and the truth. And the truth, when it comes to the media, is buried so deep sometimes that it takes years to find it. And if we're vilifying our young men, we are here we are, right? We're on this meeting and it's mostly Caucasians. Here's the truth. As Black and brown people, we're already starting at a deficit, right? The media now pronounces it and makes it worse, right? So we're already back here. They're pushing us much further and we're still screaming, I can't breathe. Right? It's not just about George Floyd and the physical knee that was on his neck. It's that proverbial knee that's on our neck all the time. And the media is a part of that. That's why you have so many people with their phones out trying to get the real story, trying to make sure that nothing gets lost. But you also need the media to be able to report most of these things. So that's why I say it's a double-edged sword. But that's why we're here at this time on this precipice, to hold everyone accountable, to talk about good trouble, and to make sure that we are provided the resources that we need to make sure that we're safe, to make sure that our voices are heard, right? So.
Thank you, Mayor. Our next topic is going to be on the Police Accountability Reform Bill. We were curious about your thoughts on it, Wayne, the chief, and the mayor. Is it enough? Is it too much? How do we move forward with that environment? Wayne, did you want to start with that?
Yeah, Elizabeth. I think it's, in my personal view, some of it is warranted. Others, part of it is not. I like what the chief said earlier, is that in a situation, when an officer can use deadly force, if they could de-escalate instead of escalate, I think that is so basic and so essential that I think it would solve a lot of these issues. So that's part of the Accountability Act that I like. And I also like the other parts of it that says that officers are not going to be held to a certain quota. for traffic stops and so forth. And there won't be penalized as a result of that. So I think those are some really good things. And also what the chief said is that in communities where there's a predominantly large minority population, the agency should hire and promote minorities within those agencies just to match the community. So I think those are some really good parts and some basic and parts that everyone can get behind from the bill.
Thank you, Wayne. Chief?
I'm going to echo a lot of the things that Wayne said. I think that there is a need for, as I said earlier, professionalization of the profession of policing. I think that the discussions and moving the needle that way was good. My concern is that a lot of the things that were included, not a lot of the things, some of the things that were included were done very hastily, without a lot of discussion and inclusion from police chiefs and police management on how we could implement some of the things. Some of the use of force standards, I am concerned will cause officers to second guess themselves while they're engaged in a situation, or will prevent them from getting engaged and doing things when they should. So I think a few of those things need to be worked out. Recruitment and retention issues, that's a very complicated subject. I've spent not just the 10 years I've been here as chief, but many years while I was in Hartford trying to diversify a workforce. And the number of applicants that we get from minority communities is very low. And then the current testing practice that the state mandates that we put them through tends to filter out a lot of applicants along the way. And as police agencies, we are all recruiting from a very small pool, so we have to be very competitive in doing that. And we've done a decent job of doing that in Bloomfield, but we've also had a lot of attrition of minority officers who have left from retirement, normal retirement, or pursuit of separate agencies. So it's a very broad category, something that we have to continue working on into the future, and not rest on where we've been, and continue to try and increase the diversity of our workforce.
Thank you, Chief. As a follow-up question to that, can you comment on the use of force continuum that was described in the book? Is that something that's is still used?
Yeah, well, I talked about this in a council meeting about a month and a half ago. It was something that was implemented during my career. It is something that has not been used widely in the past, I would say, 10 years. Now the standard of necessary and reasonable force is what we kind of act by in Connecticut, at least progressive police agencies. Use of force continuum tended to train officers that, well, if the person has a stick, then you have to pull out something of equal or greater force. So you'd have to pull out a nightstick, or you'd have to pull out your gun. And what we've tried to instill in officers now, the more modern thinking is, you have to escalate the force only that which is necessary or reasonable to overcome the resistance or the force that's being used against you. So if you can continue to talk to somebody and try and de-escalate a situation that way, then by all means do that. But if it escalates immediately to where someone pulls out a knife or someone pulls out a gun, then you have to be able to respond to that situation in a reasonable and safe manner, trying to still limit that amount of force. Now, the vast majority of police officers that I have worked with in my career take no pleasure in using force. Have I seen officers that do? Of course I have. You know, I've been in this line of work 30 years. I've seen a lot of things that I don't want to see. But the majority of people police officers, professional police officers out there, are trying to do the right thing. They want to go home at the end of the day to their families, safe, secure. They want to protect people who are being victimized. And unfortunately, in some instances, the application of force is necessary. We have to make sure that that is done correctly, and that if we see any indication that officers are progressing in the wrong direction, that we institute training, that we institute discipline to bring them back to the straight and narrow, if you will. And if we can't do that, then we need to remove them from the profession, because there's too much power and authority there, and you have to make sure in any situation where someone has a great deal of power and authority that you limit that, and that you have safeguards to ensure that they're doing the right thing and they're doing it for the right reason.
Thank you, Chief. Mayor, did you want to comment on your thoughts about the Police Accountability Reform Bill?
So yes, what I want, or what I would like for the police to understand is, in supporting this bill doesn't mean we don't support them, the good ones, right? Because I think it's, well, if you support the bill, you don't support the police department, and that's not true. Once again, I think we have an amazing police department here in Bloomfield. We're not perfect, right, Chief? Just go ahead and nod. But we are a decent department, and we have a wonderful leader. So supporting the police accountability bill does not mean that we do not support our police officers. And I think the good police officers have nothing to worry about. It's that small, minute percentage of those who don't fully understand that they're truly here to serve and to protect. So I just wanted to get that out there in the airspace and make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Wayne, we wanted to take a moment to have you read from the book a recommendation that is included in the bill.
I don't have that passage. I couldn't find that passage in the book. I was looking for it.
Oh, I don't have the page number, I'm sorry. Bad librarian moment.
Bad. But I think one of the recommendations that was in the bill, that as I stated earlier, was if a situation warrants to de-escalate, an officer should de-escalate. If there are, 4 or 5 officers and there's one gentleman, and the situation is starting to get out of control, but then it starts to ease or to level off, one of those officers should say, you know what, let's try to de-escalate, let's try to calm things down, and take this individual into custody and so forth. And I think that's one of the recommendations that we have in the book, is if a situation warrants, then officers should move towards de-escalating instead of escalating the situation. And I think, again, I think that's one of the very basic things, and that could solve many of these issues or incidents, and hopefully avoid some of these unnecessary incidents in the future. Like, for example, if we look at George Floyd, 8 minutes and 46 seconds, and you had 4 or 5 officers just standing around there. One officer had to say, you know what, we have him under control. It's good. He'd probably still be here. There were civilians shouting and saying, he can't breathe. And if the officer just recognized that, then maybe George Floyd will still be here. So I think those are some obvious situations where if it could be de-escalated, it could save lives. And that's one of the recommendations that we have in the book.
Thank you, Wayne. What obstacles do we think are in the way of good police community relations, both at the national level, but more specifically at the Bloomfield level? Chief?
Is that question for me?
It's for you or the mayor. Chief, do you want to get started on it? Any initial thoughts?
Sure. I think we have to continue to communicate. The mayor and I have talked about this in the past. In the wake of Ferguson, we had some initial discussions. We started at Bethel AME Church. A little while later, we were at, I think we were at First Congregational, where we had a follow-up conversation. And then you start to go on with your life, and you do things until the next incident pops up, right? And then the questions come up: why haven't we been doing anything? Why haven't we made any progress? I think that, you know, this time feels a little bit different to me, because there's momentum. There's a larger segments, more inclusive segments of the community, rather than just the African American community, are saying we need to talk about this. Something needs to be done, and I think it takes including our whole community in those conversations, because it's not just a police and minority members of the community that need to have this discussion. We all do, and we all need to come to a better understanding of each other. And that sounds very, you know, touchy-feely, but it's true. And at the same respect, from a professional standpoint, without being too long-winded, there has to be a greater understanding of what police officers are out there doing, what they're trained to do. You know, we do a civilian police academy at the police department. It's 12 weeks, 2 hours every Tuesday night. And it never ceases to amaze me that at the end of the 12 weeks, I talk to people who came in very apprehensive, and at the end, they've learned a lot about what they see out on the road, why they see 2 or 3 officers at a particular call, you know, what they're doing, and they get a greater understanding of not only the challenges, but of how we're trained to do the job. And I think that, especially as we talk about, you know, civilian review boards, things like that, we need to ensure that people who are doing that oversight and people who are conducting those reviews have that kind of training, so that they know and they have a greater understanding of an appreciation for both sides of the equation.
Thank you, Chief. Mayor?
I agree. I think we really do need to get back to community. I think, going back to the media, one of the things with the media is now you have this fear of being stopped by the police. You have this fear that, as a mother, I have that fear that my beautiful Black boy will go out there and have a situation that he doesn't know how to handle, and I'm not there with him. So you have this fear. You have to bring back, and I say it because that's what police is for. They're to serve and to protect us. And I also talk about way back in the Stone Ages, when you used to have officer friendly at your school, and you knew who the officer was, he knew who you were, he knew your brother and your sister. So it made that relationship a little bit more authentic. It made that relationship more of a relationship than a them against us kind of thing. And that's what we need to get back to. We need to get back to community. And that will be important. And everything that we have seen on TV, every single horrific thing that we have seen as far as incidents with Black and brown people and the police officers have been absolutely horrible. We've got to be intentional on building that relationship back intentionally. And here in Bloomfield, we started it, right? So something happened, we attacked that thing for that moment, and then it died down, and then we pulled back. Shame on us. This is a moment in time that this movement has to continue. It should not subside because the hoopla is gone, because all the hashtags have now been finished, because all the Black Lives Matter murals have been painted. We need to be able to invest in our generation and the generation to come. So we've got to be intentional on making this movement move forward so that we can be better in the end.
Thank you, Mayor. We have a follow-up question from Joan for the chief, going back to the media portrayals. Please comment on the description of profiling in the book. Franklyn was in many ways constructed as a criminal by the institution of the police. This was not a matter of a few nefarious police officers, but rather a coordinated effort by the police and associated justice systems. And that was a thought I had too in the book, the quick response from the police department to get something out in the media. So thank you, Joan, for the question. Chief?
Yeah, I mean, you know, every agency acts differently. I think, you know, the management there, the police chief may have wanted to paint a picture of an incident or get a viewpoint, get their own viewpoint out there, kind of a defensive move. I don't know. I don't know what to attribute to their motives there. You know, my interaction with the media has always been you can have it fast or you can have it accurate. You know, when you're out at scenes, they want the information right away. They're thirsty for it. And you know, in police training circles, they say, well, you got to feed the beast. You got to keep giving them information. The problem with that is sometimes you're giving them the wrong information and the wrong picture, the wrong idea of a situation gets painted before you can get an accurate portrayal out there. As far as profiling, there's so many different definitions and descriptions of profiling. You know, from profiling that is absolutely unacceptable, from just pulling somebody over because of their ethnicity or the color of their skin, or taking action against them for that reason, that's completely unacceptable. If we as police officers look at, you know, analyzing someone's actions while they're out on the road, you know, are they standing at the corner? Are they approaching cars? Are they exchanging something with multiple drivers of cars over a period of a half hour? Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out the person's probably dealing drugs at the corner. Now, that is a type of profiling, right? You're looking at it and saying, that fits the profile of a narcotics dealer on the corner. That is, in my mind, that's an acceptable type of profiling. You're looking at multiple factors in an incident. You're taking in the totality of what you're seeing to make a reasonable judgment that that person is dealing narcotics, which you could go forward and investigate further. But just seeing a black man walk down the street at 3 o'clock in the morning and stopping them because they are, that's completely unacceptable, you know? And I think any good police officer worth their salt knows that. So we see things from different perspectives. You know, we try to train our officers to be observant, to not indicate off one or two things, but multiple factors. And then, you know, what I always say is, if you're going to stop somebody, you better be able to articulate why you did that. You know, why did you stop them? What did you see that gave you a reasonable suspicion to stop them and to inquire further? And that's the standard that we operate under.
Thank you, Chief. Early in the book, we learn that Franklyn is a high school dropout. Later, it seems he gets himself in a cycle of police stops, arrests, jail time, and legal fees. To what extent do you believe racist attitudes, implicit bias, and microaggressions disproportionately set up Black teens for a criminal record more than white teens, like it did for Franklyn as a young adult? Wayne?
Well, I think, living in New Milford, it's a predominantly white community where it was 99.9% white. When we moved here in 1986, you could count all of the Black people on your hands and not get to 10. So as a result of that, you stick out like a sore thumb. So if Franklyn started to get in issues with the local police department, those things would compound over a period of time. So, I believe in 1988 was his first run-in with the police department, where he was going to pick up my brother at school, and the vice principal told him that you're not allowed on school property. If you come back again, I'm going to call the police and get you for trespassing. So as a result of that first incident, he was put into the system. So whenever the other police officers would see him, they would pull him over for whatever reason, and so forth. So I believe where you are in the communities that you're from, and if it's a very small minority population, I think that you're much more likely to be either profiled or to be pulled over. And again, some of these things are contributed from law enforcement, but they're also from the individual. I'm not saying Franklyn was a perfect person. He contributed to a lot of these things as well. So I think it's just based on where you are as an individual in the communities. And I think that what dictates, if you're going to have a run-in with law enforcement for a long period of time, or, if you're going to be like other people. Like if you're a white individual, for example, and for some of the things that Franklyn did, they would have had a slap on the wrist and they would have been forgotten about. But again, because of who you are, where you're from, these things compound. And once they compound, you go back to court. And you go back to court, and the judge was like, wait a second, you were just here about 2 weeks ago. Why am I seeing you again in front of me? And then something else happens, and a month later, they go back in front of the same judge. So that happens, and the judge will say, okay, now it's time for you to go to jail, to serve time, whatever it is, and so forth, which is what happened to my brother. But I believe it's based on where you are as an individual, the community, and if it's a predominantly homogeneous community, then you're much more likely to experience some type of racism or racial interaction or prejudice or profiling.
Yeah, it also, for me as a library director and thinking about youths and what there is to do in a community, is there enough places in a community for youths to go and hang out and do the things that they do without having, people like police officers being the ones keeping an eye on them? That part stuck out to me about your brother going, and there was one place in the community where all the teens would hang out, and it got to be that the police would check in on them every day. Yep. And of course they would probably find things that the teens were doing that was not okay. And then that leads into this cycle too, maybe because there was not enough outlets for teens in that community.
And they used to hang out at Youngsfield, which is the local park. And that's where a lot of the high school kids would congregate. But my experience in town was completely different than my brother. I started, I wrestled in middle school and high school, became a state champ for New Milford High School, and started at a very young age with the church. And I believe by going that route or that path, I was able to develop as a different individual with discipline through wrestling, and to be able to accept people for who they are. And I never had any issues with the police department, since I moved here up until now, and I still live in New Milford. But I believe it's based on who you are as an individual, that if you're tagged, then you're going to experience this road, or you're going to go down this road of, being in law enforcement site for a long period of time. If you're not, then your experience is going to be completely different, which is what mine was in this town.
Thank you, Wayne. Chief and the mayor, did you want to comment on that?
You want me to go first, Madam Mayor? Okay. I think police officers are very good at identifying crimes and identifying criminal behavior and taking action. I think that there has to be better mechanisms for finding long-term solutions for first or minor offenders before they really get into the system, so to speak. In Bloomfield, we have a juvenile review board. It's an alternative to incarceration for youth offenders. That has worked very well. And it is a good way to keep them out of the criminal justice system. and to find creative solutions towards adjusting behavior and ensuring that they don't repeat those behaviors. You know, I think we also have to address that unfortunately there are violent youthful offenders, habitual criminal activity. You don't see it in Bloomfield as much, but my years in Hartford, I certainly did. I went through the early 90s where violent street gangs had a real presence in Hartford, in New Haven, in Bridgeport, and were a real threat to the quality of life for very good people in the neighborhoods of Hartford. And it's a multiple ways to solve the problem. I think there's not just one solution. You have to have an approach towards some criminal behavior that needs to go into the criminal justice system, and others that early intervention can perhaps keep them out of the system or correct behavior early so that they can break that cycle. But you know, the unfortunate thing is that there, you know, due to socioeconomic conditions, there are many children and youthful offenders out there that are just caught in that cycle, and there's no easy solution. You know, I've been 30 years in this and we haven't found the solution, and there's a lot of creative people looking at it. Doesn't mean we give up. It just means we've got to find a better way to solve it. We've got to find a better way to fix the problem.
I would echo everything the chief just said. We're great. I think our juvenile review board serves a purpose. I go back to community, right? Because if you know Tommy, and Tommy isn't really a bad kid, but he just got himself into a jam, you would know how to deal with Tommy without getting Tommy in the system. I think one of the things that happens to our Black and brown young men so often is that once they get in the system, they get so entangled that it's so hard for them to come out of that system and to come out whole, right? So we have to be really creative with programs for first-time offenders. We've got to be really creative in the rehabilitation process, so that even though a mistake was made, if it's a true mistake, there's still an opportunity for a fulfilled life after whatever that rehabilitation process is. And it's going to make everybody look at things differently and try to be creative, right? Because you want that deterrent, whatever the behavior is that got the person in the trouble. You want the deterrent, but you also don't want to cut that person off at their knees that they can't bounce back. So.
Thank you, Mayor. Wayne, I wanted to discuss Scott Smith a little bit more. It was interesting to me to note that he had a background in social services. It's what he studied in college. Do you want to comment on that and comment on him and as an individual and his tragic end?
Yeah, before we start, it was as a result of the trial, it connected two families unexpectedly. And, my family didn't ask for this, the Smith family didn't ask for this, but we were connected as a result of this incident. So I saw, Officer Smith throughout the trial. He was, in front of me, and his family sat across the aisle from my family. And I absorbed him on a daily basis. So I'd like to actually read a passage from the book based on one of my observation of Officer Smith. And this is from the scene titled 9-8-14113. My mind wanders to analyze my surroundings. I feel my breathing deepens as I glance left. Grim-faced and emotional sad, or how I describe the courtroom occupants, mingled with a heightened scent of anticipation. Observing Smith, he appears stone-faced. What are you thinking at this moment, Scott Smith? If I can hear your thoughts or feel your emotions, maybe I could figure out if we have something in common as you sit there seemingly staring into space. Our paths have never crossed, but life has pitted us on parallel tracks, traveling through a trial, searching for justice, although what you seek differs considerably. You're looking for vindication, while I'm looking for answers. We could view our journey as an opportunity to reflect upon what happened, cast its occurrences in the distant past, while showcasing it as a beacon for change in hopes of avoiding such incidents in the mysterious future. Many Scott Smiths have sat in your chair, countless Wayne Reids have found themselves in mine, and plenty of Franklyn Reids have brought us here. Some people are fortunate and blessed by the greater power to have their case displayed on the grandest stage of them all, the public domain. What an awkward feeling, though, that a personal link could be forged for the greater good of and by the people. That passage is so, resonate with me so much that I believe, Officer Smith might not have agreed with me, but I believe this was an accidental shooting. I believe that his gun went off by accident, and as a result of that, if he'd said that, I think this whole 5-year trial would have been avoided. But I believe that he received really bad legal advice initially, and he was stuck with his affidavit or with his statement. But I believe that we are a compassionate people. My family is a very compassionate family. And if Officer Smith had said at that time, you know what, it's an accident, I'm sorry, I think everyone would have been able to live with that, including myself and my family. Again, from my upbringing of growing up in the church and having a religious background, I believe that everything happens for a reason, and we must have this compassion. If people is willing to say, you know what, I'm sorry, this was an accident. I think that's how we could move forward, with a lot of these situations. In terms of Officer Smith committing, suicide, I think it was a sad situation, and I feel for his family. And for whatever they experienced, it was tough. It was another emotional journey that they experienced. So I do wish. And I do hope that he rests in peace, but my family, holds no animosity towards Officer Smith for what occurred. But everything happens for a reason, and I truly wish that at that time he said this was an accident. And if he did, I truly believe that he would probably still be here today.
Yeah, such a sad story in so many ways. Thank you for your compassion, Wayne.
Thank you. Thank you.
As we approach the 8 o'clock hour, we wanted to give each one of our panelists a minute or two to give us some uplifting words, encouragement, and a call to action. Who wants to start?
I'll start.
Okay, thanks, Wayne.
Yep. So, and thank you, Elizabeth, for hosting this event, for moderating. I think this was a great hour and a half conversation. Thank you, the chief, and thank you, the mayor, and for everyone that joined. Thank you very much. Really appreciate this, and I hope that we could continue these conversations as we move forward. 2020 has been such an impactful year that we must harness or take advantage of all of the issues that has been festering for a long period of time, and essentially the Band-Aid that's been ripped off society. So let us embrace whatever issues that we are dealing with, and let us move together and solve them. So I'd like to share another passage from the Unity chapter in the book. Here is a lesson in unified citizenship that our America needs to learn, understand, and remember. Do not presume that every minority person is inherently dangerous to Americans. Do not make presumptions that all police officers are inherently dangerous to minority persons. Many minorities have earned the Medal of Honor for their defense of America. There are many honest and courageous law enforcement personnel who expose their lives when protecting us every day. I and my family sincerely salute and thank them. But I believe in the greater scheme of life, we're all brothers and sisters, albeit a dysfunctional family with issues that needs to be resolved. And they can be. For a harmonious and safe society, we must work together, support each other, and seek common ground. I believe that we are a forgiven people living in a nation that forgives. So let our human spirit connect what is right and good in all of us. So of all the issues that we've seen so far and we continue to experience during 2020, let us not tear each other down, but build each other up. Let us continue to stand with the forces of good. And let us believe that the decade of 2020 is the dawn of a new age where we'll have, reforms, more people coming together and such. But I believe that we can have sensible reforms, and we can learn from all of these incidents, and we can use our voices to bring all of us together, because I believe all lives matter in all situations.
Thanks, Wayne. Chief?
I don't think I could have said it any better. I think you hit the nail right on the head. There are the vast majority of people in our community are good, hardworking people out there to live a high quality of life. And the vast majority of police officers serving the community are out there doing the right thing for the right reasons. I think that we need to continue to communicate, continue to work together towards improving our quality of life in our communities. And that is the only way that we can solve the problems we're seeing now and work towards a better solution.
Thanks, Chief. Mayor?
That was a virtual hug.
Thank you.
It's important as a community, right, that we see each other and not see each other through the eyes of what other people think, but see each other through our own individual eyes and be able to respect and recognize that we do have differences, respect and recognize that the first thing that you see about me is that I'm a Black woman, but there's so much more to me than that. Respect and recognize that our similarities are greater than our differences. Respect and recognize that each of us have something to offer and we each bring something different to the table. And that's why the table should be celebrated all the time. If there's questions about me or my background or my upbringing, ask. Never assume. We will get nowhere tearing each other down, but we will get everywhere building each other up. And this little community of Bloomfield, that's what we're going to be committed to do. We are truly stronger together. We are truly better when we celebrate our individuality. I didn't say our differences, I said our individuality. That's the only way that this movement is gonna make a difference. And we've gotta decide, we've got to make that decision of who we want to be, and we've gotta fight to accomplish that. So here is my shameless plug. The town of Bloomfield will have a Black Lives Matter mural done next week at the town hall. And once the mural is finished, we're going to have an unveiling celebration, a celebration of unity, a celebration of community, a celebration of who we are. And I'm hoping to see everyone, every single resident of the town. Yes, Chief, we need to practice social distancing. Yes, Elizabeth, we need to make sure that we're wearing our masks. But I want everyone to come out and celebrate and stand in unity that Black lives matter, and it matters to everyone in this town of Bloomfield. We will be an example. We will keep this momentum going. We will continue to have these courageous conversations until these conversations are no longer necessary. Not because the event has passed, but because we have changed, that our hearts and our minds have changed towards each other, so that we can truly stand in unity and we can truly believe that we are all created equal. Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you very much.
Amen.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you to our panelists and everyone who participated this evening. Thank you to librarians Sarah Ray and Rachel Tanucci for helping put this program together. We will release the recording of this program as soon as possible. One question we didn't get to is, where do libraries fit in? We'll save that for our next panel discussion. We hope that you take Bloomfield Public
Christine,
Library.
you want me to call you, girl?
We hope that you take Bloomfield Public Library up on our offer to read more about these issues and take part in future programming of all kinds, but especially programming that explores topics and issues of immediate relevance and importance in our community. We have so many materials for all age groups, all reading levels, fiction, nonfiction. We have Wayne's book, Death by Cop. We have Jason Reynolds and Ibram Kendi's Stamped. We have Motherhood, So White. We have How I Resist Activism and Hope for a New Generation. We have Oprah's Magazine for the first time, Breonna Taylor on the cover. We have Atlantic discussion groups that meet once or twice a month. This month we have a topic, The Power of American Denial, by Ibram Kendi, that we will be discussing. Just call us. We will give you a copy of this to bring home. We have books for kids, such as Vote for Our Future, make sure you're registered to vote, and Undefeated. And most of all, we have the staff to help you find the materials you may be interested in. So please give us a call. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at BPLCT. And stay calm and read on, folks. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Have a wonderful evening.